Hello, folks. Welcome to Pro Trader Strategies Market Commentary for Monday, June the 14th. We're an educational company. What we're trying to do here is talk about the markets and educate you on how to trade options around any given assumption. So please hit that subscribe button right down there at the bottom so you guys get access to these videos when we're shooting them live. It should help you out in your trading day. Also, smash that like button. It really does help us out. And finally, comment over there at the bottom. Even throughout these videos, I'm going to try and make sure you're clear of concept before we move on. So I'd love to hear from you folks throughout this video, and we'll go back and forth over there in that chat window. All right, so let's get on with the economic data across the pond. Really, there isn't anything to talk about because it is a Monday for the most part, other than one point I want to talk about, and that is manufacturing sales out of Canada. I don't usually talk about Canada so much, but this number came in at negative 2.1%, expected to be a positive 1.1%, so a massive miss on that. Also, industrial production coming out at 0.8%, expected to be 0.4% out of the greater European region there. So that's not really what's driving the overall markets here. We're seeing crude oil move higher by about 51 cents, 53 cents. Now it is tied to the dollar. We're seeing strength in the dollar and continuing to see crude oil make these moves to the upside. That should be due to demand, right? If that's what we're thinking here. We've seen drawdowns in crude oil. That should give us a little bit more of a push to the upside. But the major user of the energy is going to be the manufacturing process, all right? So we're not seeing a lot of that. We're actually seeing some of this pullback in some of this manufacturing sectors. So that's going to be crimping some of the demand for crude oil. And then we talk about gold futures are coming off. Actually, let's talk about bonds are coming off a little bit today. As a matter of fact, nice little pattern set up here if you're looking for a swing trade where we've gotten a little overextended to the upside, talking about the Fed holding off on these or continuing the asset purchases, I should say, throughout the end of the year. That should give us a little bit of a lift here in the bonds. But there's a lot of folks out there saying the Fed really needs to open their eyes about this transitory inflation that they're talking about. It's not looking so transitory when prices are being raised across the board in these different companies, whether it's in restaurants or manufacturing. We're seeing those prices go higher. They don't cut those prices, folks. They don't cut wages after they've jacked them up. That means that is not going to be transitory. That means inflation is probably here to stay for a little while. All right, and then we're talking about gold futures. They are seeing some weakness today as that strength in the dollar is coming through. Assets that are tied to the dollar should be seeing some weakness here with the dollar strengthening. Now, an inflationary gauge is another aspect of gold futures, which could cause it to move a little bit higher. Those are going to be two counter-opposing forces with gold here. Is inflation should drive it higher. A stronger dollar should drive it a little bit lower. So it is a bit of a conundrum right now as those forces are going to be fighting each other. Bitcoin moving $3,000 higher and back into 40,000. All right, we've been talking about this for the last several weeks. I think that the sweet spot for Bitcoin is right around somewhere between 35 and 37 as we're building up time and volume in and around that area. It seems like it's going to want to build in some volume in and around this area. So I would think that we are not probably going to see 50,000, but we definitely with this rally should at least test 44,000 in the next couple of days. I think we're going to go up there and test that. But for the most part, I think then we'll see a little bit more weakness seeping into this market as well. VIX is moving a little bit higher as we got a mixed bag across the board. We've got the NASDAQ moving higher today. Well, we got the Dow Jones Industrial Average almost off as much as the NASDAQ. And we're continuing to see this whole reopen trade versus the tech trade and the sector rotations back and forth. Well, it's the sector rotation back into tech. It is in the limelight right now. And some of these blue chips are really starting to struggle here throughout the day with the Dow Jones seeing weakness. Now, we could say that the E-mini S&Ps are pretty much unchanged for the most part. Pretty quiet day here, but really struggling to make new highs in this market. There's just some weakness here in the equities that outside of tech, I should say, that is showing some weakness. And with that said, I've added some negative deltas to my portfolio, and we'll talk about here in a minute. We'll see some different opportunities out there. And as you can see, overnight, we are pretty flat on the day, but day session here, no economic data. It's just continuing to be weak throughout the day. Obviously, the risk in equities, from my point of view, is to the downside outside of that tech sector. All right, eBay, confirmation of a top. Now, I've been kind of waiting on this. We've talked about this several times, where we have seen this market start to slow down and waiting for an opportunity for a confirmation to come through, and we never really got it until today. So when we're looking at this setup here, I'm just going to specifically be looking at this area right here. So I'll just zoom in on that right now. And we can see that there was a couple of times where we've got some topping patterns. There's one right there. We got another doji, like 5 days in a row. We were getting these dojis where normally at the top of a move, those are pretty solid topping patterns, where anytime you get a, hammer like this or a hangman doji, whether it's red or green at the top of a move, and you can see that we were getting several of those. That's showing that the momentum is starting to slow down here, and that the bears are starting to come back to the market. Well, today they started taking over with that confirmation of the top right now. So we've got a topping pattern and then the confirmation. Today, I'm going to play this to the downside using a poor man's covered put. That is basically looking at a short position with defined risk. We can define the risk in a portfolio by setting it up with a long call as well, and I'll show you how to do that, where we can find this risk. But the poor man's covered put is a short position where we're going to be playing this the downside. I'm going to be breaking down how to do that and why we would use the poor man's covered put in the webinar this week, where we are using option strategies around a bearish assumption. So there's always a bear market out there somewhere. I found a couple for you folks. And with that said, I was tossing it up. Do I want to do the poor man's covered put or just a synthetic short here in eBay? I decided to go with the synthetic short in the October, and I bought the October 65 puts, bearish assumption here, and then to add that to make it just like I'm shorting the stock without all the headache, I went in there and sold the 65 calls in there for a total of 50-cent credit. That means my break even is right there at 65.50. When the underlying is trading around there, that's when I am at a break even. So like we're looking at right now, 1 penny above where I got involved. So I'm down a penny on this trade. By setting it up with the calls and the puts, we can create a situation where I have negative 100 deltas, which is just like selling 100 of the underlying. And I will profit dollar for dollar as this underlying goes down. And on the flip side, for a loss, I will lose dollar for dollar on the upside for that trade. So playing this to the downside, another one that I've already added negative deltas to, but is making a nice big topping pattern today. I got involved on this with the confirmation. We got a little bit of a bounce here. The beauty in options is it allows me to stay in this longer. If I had shorted this underlying, I would have been out of this for a loss on Friday. Today, with this topping pattern, I'm still able to stay in this trade because I am long put. So if you are looking to get involved, adding some negative deltas, Lulu might be a good candidate for this, as we've had a couple of topping patterns happen in this underlying, and finally really getting to an area where we are seeing a real resistance area, which is right there. And I got involved in and around this underlying right here. So I did get involved when it was confirmed, but we did get a little bit of a bounce. I think that based on this chart pattern setup, it's not confirmed right now, but it would be an opportunity to keep on your radar for a long put because we have really low implied volatility down here. So a long put would work very well in this type of situation. If you had a bearish assumption, that would be a limited risk type of trade. That's what I have on for Lululemon on this trade for a bearish move, because we have low implied volatility. I expect that volatility to expand when we get down to these levels. That will help a strategy like this out if we start moving to the downside and get that volatility expansion. That will help this trade out really nicely. I would get basically all the levers and pulleys working in my favor. All right, and that's all I've got for you guys. Please take a moment to go over our disclaimer down there in the little section below there. Also, like I said, comment. If you have any questions, comments, or anything else, please throw it over there in the comment section. What is your favorite type of chart pattern setup that you like to look for on any given directional move? So I'd love to hear from you guys on that. Also, don't forget to subscribe so that when we're doing these live, I'm going to be doing them at 11:30 Eastern throughout the week. And then we also have some webinars on Thursdays that you can check out. And finally, smash that or take that. Bye for now and take it easy.